I would like to acknowledge the work of Monica, our visual facilitator, who had transformed our ideas and discussions into this wonderful artwork. Thank you very much, Monica. And she also made this poster for the Year of the Mother. So mothers weave the world together. It's so wonderful. So follow her in her Activate Labs, Instagram and Facebook. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Beth Ferrante, co-founder of Work 360. We're a training and development platform to support working parents and provide programming and connection to personalized support for both the working parent as well as their managers. But I'm also a contributing writer for Forbes, and I write on the intersection of work and parenting. And through that channel, I've had the pleasure of highlighting our final keynote speaker and sharing some of the amazing work that she's doing in declaring 2020 the Year of the Mother. So I'm very excited to introduce Jill Koziol, maybe, close. She's the co-founder and CEO of Motherly, a modern lifestyle brand redefining motherhood with its 30 million monthly audience. Amazing. And she's also the co-author of the book that Joy has been sharing. This is Motherhood, a motherly collection of reflections and practices, and a forthcoming book, The Motherly Guide to Becoming Mama, redefining pregnancy, birth, and postpartum journey. She's passionate about serving and empowering women, mothers, and helping us all become successful, because when moms win, everyone wins. And she's an advocate for families, female founders, and how to thrive with multiple sclerosis, which I apologize for botching that. And we're so grateful to have you, Jill, and thank you for coming down. She lives up in the Bay Area with her 2 wonderful children and her husband. So thank you. And I'm going to join, and Joy is coming back, our fearless founder, fearless leader.
Jill, there we go. It's wonderful to have you closing out a really empowering 2-day event as the leader of Motherly and really the movement to support motherhood.
So honored to be here amongst all of you every single day, redefining motherhood and doing things to support the women and the mothers and the families in this country and beyond. So really humbled to be here with each of you, and Joy, the Year of the Mother would not happen if it weren't for you, and so it really does take a village.
Well, we wanted to share some of the highlights from a really groundbreaking survey that Motherly started 2 years ago. Before we jump into the survey, though, tell us a little bit more about Motherly. Who is Motherly? Why did you come to find it, etc.?
Absolutely. So we're actually, from the first conversation about Motherly, is about to be 5 years. In April was when my co-founder, an award-winning journalist and editor from the Washington Post, Liz Tennedy, reached out to me. We were acquaintances. That's a longer story. But she reached out to me because she was feeling very entrepreneurial and really felt that motherhood had led her to be more creative, and that she wanted to break outside of the traditional journalist world, and felt that the area where that creativity could find a home was motherhood, and that there was a real white space that existed because media, as you know, often treats motherhood almost as cartoonish, and really feeds into these mommy wars. And what we came together to realize was that this generation of women, I'm barely a millennial, but I still am. This generation of women specifically is incredibly different. She is the most educated ever. This is the first time in history that women are more educated than men, and that changes everything. Women, because education is power, and we're having children later. We know who we are when we're after having children. My mom was 23 when she had me, and looking back now, we were babies when we were 23. I was 31 when I had my child. I had a full career. I knew who I was, and so motherhood looks different on people that are having them a little bit later. And so when an entire generation starts to have children later, motherhood starts to look different. first. The second was that this is the first digitally native generation, and that also changes everything. It changes how we interact with content. It changes the authenticity, the kinds of conversations that not only are we willing to have, but that we demand that people have. And the third is that 2 years ago was the first time in the US that the majority of births in this country were of minorities. So it is still, white women that look like me that are giving birth in the majority right now, but we come from very diverse relationships and families now. And so that means that we needed to build a platform that was woman-centered, not baby-centered, that was expert-driven, not user-generated content or alarmist in any way, and that also was empowering and really left this woman feeling like she's got this. And so we founded Motherly to do and to be that. And we spent 3 years, the first 3 years, really connecting with this woman with content, and making sure that we were emotionally connecting with her on her phone and in her home, in her heart, and supporting and sharing stories and expert information. And now we've got the first book, the second book coming out. We're launching our e-commerce platform actually in April also, and so really trying to provide 360-degree solutions for this very busy woman.
Tell us about the size of your audience.
It feels like bragging sometimes. So it's in those 3 years, the first 3 years of Motherly, we have 30 million women per month now that are watching our videos or reading our content, and we don't spend any money on marketing. That is organic, mom-to-mom sharing of our content. That is building content that women can relate to and that they will inherently share, because again, as digital natives, we share things that reflect who and what we are. And so sharing content that again wasn't mommy wars or bashing things or talking about hot mess motherhood, right? But more of celebrating the power that comes from motherhood, acknowledging the challenges, but finding solutions for those also. And so that community now has grown, and frankly, it's only about 40 to 50% each month US. It is so much international because by being non-judgmental, we can cross cultural boundaries in a very real way. And I say a lot at Motherly that motherhood is treated as niche, when in reality, this is one of the most universal human experiences. And it is the thing that I get the chills when I say it even. It's the thing that unites us together. It is the thing that brings humanity together. It is the future of humanity. And so the ability to connect women everywhere, women from Kenya writing to us and saying that Motherly has changed her vision of motherhood for herself, right? Like that's powerful. And I think that's how we really do change the future. That one that works.
Did we tweet that?
Yes.
Oh. We treat motherhood as niche when it is, what was that last point?
When it is one of the most universal human experiences.
Beautiful. I was so excited to read about the United State of Motherhood survey. And Mary Beth, thank you for joining us on stage. As you covered the survey in a Forbes article, one of the first surveys, you also were one of the first to cover the Year of the Mother. So it's so apropos that you would be on stage with us. But I wanted to highlight what stood out at me in one of the statements about the survey was that the results from this 2019 survey show that 85% of moms don't think society understands or supports them. And that was up 10% from the year prior. What do you think that's about?
So the survey itself, we're actually just gearing up to do the third annual survey. It is the largest, most statistically significant and accurate survey of millennial mothers in the United States. We're actually going to expand it to get international tidbits and information this year too. But we do the work not just surveying and getting a broad spectrum of people, but we also actually weight the data to make sure that it is aligned with the US demographic data, the census data. So this is an accurate representation. Like we do the hard work to make sure that we really are the voice of this woman, of the millennial mom. And again, the millennial mom is is one sliver of this. I believe, and I think most of you would agree, that the things that are coming up through this generation are how we're all feeling, no matter which generation we find ourselves in. So that 85% of women saying that they don't feel supported by society is, as you said, up 10% from the year before. And we dug into it a bit deeper. And once you've said that you feel that way and nothing changes, more people say it, right? Like we got the conversation started around this, and so others are now willing to acknowledge, no, that's true. Because what happens when you ask a mom, like, how are you doing? I'm fine. I'm great. Everything's good. And so the first time you ask, that's what you get. Everything's fine. But if you ask again and you say, but really, how are you doing? I mean, even Meghan Markle will like tell you the truth, right? You're more willing to have the conversation. I think we've started to make it comfortable for people to say that they're not okay.
Does it sound like maternal mental health screening, everyone? It does. Thank you for that. And have you unpacked like what's behind that? We don't feel supported. And then Mary Beth, I want to hear your thoughts on that point as well as a journalist that's wrote about the survey.
So a lot of things, as you can imagine, and this is why we, with Mom Congress, have decided to, and with many other organizations and individuals, to declare 2020 the Year of the Mother. Because it's not just one thing, it's many, many things. And I know we'll talk more about Year of the Mother in a bit, so I won't delve too deep into it. But this woman, we all are being asked to nurture in a society that does not nurture us back. Women have been layering roles for years and years and years, and there is a desynchronous change between how fast women are layering those roles and how fast the rest of society, at the cultural level, at the corporate governance level, and also at the legislative level. We're not keeping pace with how the world is evolving and this woman is evolving. You know, Liz said that she felt a lot of creativity and entrepreneurship, my co-founder, when she became a mother. Well, it's necessity, right? Like innovation is breeded through necessity oftentimes. And this is what moms are doing every day, all day. And it's why there are so many new female entrepreneurs and mother entrepreneurs out there. But it's because we have to. And so when you unpack it, it's at every level. It's the lack of maternal mental health. It's the lack of maternal, the maternal health, like generally, the mortality challenges that we're having as a country with women and with mothers. It's the fact that there's not affordable childcare, that there's no paid family leave. It's the fact that we still aren't having these conversations in our own homes in a very honest way. It cuts across everything.
Great, that's helpful.
I think that's a really important point, and what I'd love to understand from you, and this wasn't on the list of questions, so it's just from the Motherly platform and from your perspective, how are you helping this mom, this millennial woman, find her voice to advocate for herself, to have those conversations at home, to ask for the help that she needs, to speak up at work for the policy changes that need to be had?
So it's like marketing. It takes 7 times, 7 different ways to actually see it happen, and different things work for different people. So we try to come across it a lot of different ways. One is our videos and our content, and the ability that you can share this with a spouse, right, or with a partner, and that it can be the thing that is the catalyst for the conversation. I use it personally with my husband, so I'll say, look, it's not just us that's struggling with this, right? Because that's how it often feels, that this is just our problem, and it's not a societal problem or a cultural problem. And so that's the first one, is we share the content that is both first-person essays and data that come together to really show a full picture of something where you can see yourself in that woman. And therefore, that can be the catalyst for the conversation. The other is on social media, these micro narratives that we do, specifically on Instagram. So Motherly really started to show these vignettes, these micro narratives of the tough side of motherhood, right? And finding the beauty in that too, but really it's in the beauty of the sharing of this universal experience. And people are tagging their friends and saying, oh, this is you, or I so needed to see this right now. And That's a big part of it. Again, it is marketing in some ways, right? You're marketing to women to have these conversations. On LinkedIn with Year of the Mother, that has given a whole new kind of platform, because now I'm talking a lot about what we do at Motherly. We're a fully remote organization that's all flexible work that employs 90% working mothers. And what do we do to do that, to facilitate the ability for women to integrate work and life in a way that actually can work, even in a fast-paced startup? And so I talk about that on LinkedIn, and ask people to write down what your employer's doing, or tag them here and ask this question. So I think it's just more conversation and a lot of different levels of conversation.
I love that question, Mary Beth. 2 or 3 other big highlights from the survey.
There were a lot, and I think this year's we're getting better and better at how we ask these questions and get to the deeper root of things. There were 2. One's about working motherhood, and one is about intimacy and sex, that I think are really important and very much connect with this topic here with mental health. So one is, and I put a couple stats here, 48% of women say that they felt ready to have sex again after giving birth 6 weeks to 6 months, okay? But 31% said that they had sex sooner than they felt ready. Something's broken about this system, that we are making women after giving birth, let's not even talk about going back to work, the average 2 weeks, but not just the fact that they're going back to work early, but we're also the expectation that we're placing on them to be back to this full person that feels in control of their own body, and that they are available for intimacy in some way. And the trauma that birth can lead to, and the societal pressures, and then therefore inside relationships. And this doesn't mean that that 31% of women are in abusive relationships or unhealthy relationships. It means that there is just this cultural pressure to do things before we're ready. And that's dangerous. That is a problem. The fact that we go back to work, or we go back to the doctor 6 weeks after giving birth, and what's the number one question? You're there really to be cleared to have sex. Right? Isn't that the whole point of this? That is like the primary thing. Okay, now you can go have sex. And some of us are lucky enough to have OBs that say, you are physically ready, but please know that if you want to tell your partner that you need another month, you go ahead and say, I said so. But not everyone has that, and this is contributing and, again, layering on these roles that we feel like we have to have that leave women feeling burnt out. So that would be one, is the realization that women are having sex far sooner. And this is something we definitely don't talk about. Who was telling their friends, oh, I just had sex for the first time after giving birth? That's not a conversation topic we're having, so everyone assumes that it's them that doesn't feel comfortable doing it. And so to be able to expose that it's 48%, half of women said it's someplace more like 6 weeks to 6 months where they felt comfortable. So release that pressure on yourselves. The other is that 50% of women reported making a change in their careers after having a child. And the majority meant lessening hours, moving from full-time to part-time, or even becoming a stay-at-home mom. Now, for some, that's not a choice. For some, that is a choice that they want to make. For others, it's because they just can't make it work. And this is a problem because, remember, the most educated cohort in the United States is this woman. And so our GDP, our productivity, our future as a country depends on finding ways for this woman to get to work. And if we can't do that as a government, as a society, as a corporations, we're missing out on this talent. We're missing out on the things that will actually drive productivity in this country. And not surprisingly, what was it? so many say this. 81% said that their spouses or their partners did not make a change, or 31% it did not make a change or increased their work. Because again, it's a necessity in the economy and the way that it is, and where jobs are located require often dual incomes or one very great income. And so this is the other thing that just feels like there's a real incongruence between what the world needs of us and what we're even capable of doing.
Well, it's really interesting because if you look at statistics and you ask women right around when they enter college if they plan to go back to work after having children, 98% say yes, right? Yet 50% of women are still feeling like they have to make this significant change because our workplaces aren't adapting. So I think it's really fascinating to kind of bring that up. And then it's how can Motherly help support these women to make those changes and to be resilient?
Well, we're a pretty big voting bloc,
Yeah.
I'd say, too.
Well, 2 points. So employers, and you hinted at this, and this is the work that you do, Mary Beth.
Yeah.
Tell us at Work 360, how are you counseling employers to make these adjustments, and then we'll move into the policy conversation.
Yeah, so I mean, some of it is parity, right? Because if we have gender equity, we can add $1.2 trillion to GDP, which is crazy town, right? So, it's looking at how are the biases integrated into the workplace. And so there's a few core things. Like one is, paid family leave, for sure, and equitable, accessible, and adequate paid family leave. So meaning greater than 12 weeks, accessible regardless of how you start your family, and also regardless of your gender, and eliminating primary and secondary distinctions, because what is a secondary parent? I don't know, right? And then I think, really looking at the care, accessibility to affordable care. So this is a huge crisis, and it really is one of the biggest reasons why women don't go back to work. And then the third being really, what are they walking back into? So we can give them a leave, but then how are we helping support them? Do they have community? Do they have empathetic managers? Are they able to scale back without opting out of the workforce? Because there is an overwork premium, and the ability to get promoted and to continue to rise in your career usually requires more than 40 hours a week, more like 50 or 60. And so how can we create new pathways to leadership without pushing people completely out?
So before Motherhood, I was a strategy consultant in organizational agility and working with a lot of three-letter agencies and like Fortune 50 government contractors and the such. And we were doing a lot of studies around gender diversity and also just cognitive diversity and how you solve problems better when you have people with different backgrounds, not just different genders. And one of the things that has come up recently I thought was really interesting is that Goldman Sachs did a study because they had this leaky pipeline of female talent, right? And I mean, we all can, have done this study for them very quickly, I'm sure. But they did this study, and what they found was their women were not opting out that were leaving. They were going to another place with the same job title in many cases. But what they found was that they could reinvent themselves professionally at a different place in a different way than they could where they had worked before, because they had set a personal brand for themselves. The expectations were set for what kind of worker they were, and it's not that they couldn't do the job. It's just that they were a little transformed. They were a lot transformed by this experience, and they needed to come back with the freedom to experiment with what that would look like for them without all of the expectations from before. And so what they found at Goldman Sachs was, we're just not doing a good job of onboarding these women back and giving them that freedom to move around, maybe with different teams or otherwise. And so it's different for different industries and how you make this work. It's different companies, it's different women. And at Motherly, we talk about personalized leave. Like, we really try to personalize that experience for people. But we have 60 employees. Like, it's smaller, it's easier to do on a smaller scale than it certainly is on a larger.
I want to move to the policy platform. And before we jump into the pillars that Motherly is focused on around policy, I want to ask those of you who are in the room, I see a couple of you who were at Mom Congress last year at opening night and heard Jill's co-founder, Liz, speak about policy. We were so moved. She was so eloquent. like you around the policy opportunities. And this has really become Motherly's policy platform and why we're so excited about the alignment with Mom Congress this year.
So Motherly is not a nonprofit, like many of you there. Like, we are a startup, a venture-backed startup, and a business. And so it's important for us that we're not ostracizing a demographic or someone that we're trying to work with as a business. And so policy is something that can be very polarizing. And so we really waited a couple years to do the State of Motherhood survey and to really be the voice of this woman, of today's modern mom. And from that, it was so crystal clear what the policy areas were. And so there are some things on this Year of the Mother that we're not touching, that we're not talking about, because we don't feel that there is a real movement toward yet across the board. And so there's categories that you may think talking about motherhood that would be on this that are not. And that's purposeful, because change doesn't happen overnight, and you do have to pick your battles. And there are some things that we feel like there is really just a momentum behind right now, that now is the time. And we're declaring, with hopefully each of you, 2020 as the Year of the Mother, because it's about damn time. This is the time. This is the time. It's long overdue. Again, most universal experience, one of the largest voting blocks that is. We're in an election year, and no matter what side of the aisle you sit on, these are the conversations that we should be having with the people that are being elected. These are the conversations that we should be having in our homes, and these are the conversations that we should be having with our employers. Because, again, this is the future of the world. It's not a small matter here. And there is economic rationale for why we make these changes. It will make a difference for this country. It will make a difference for the world. And now is the time to do this. There are more bills on the congressional floor than ever before related to motherhood. There is just this swelling of just people feeling the power of their voice. And I actually think that Me Too had a lot to do with it. I feel like Me Too gave women just permission in a way to speak very openly about hard things and to understand the power of their voice. And what we found was that these conversations are happening for women, but they were stopping just short of motherhood, right? That they were we talk about finding equality in the workplace for women, and while a lot more is needed, advancements are being made, but it was stopping just short of where the penalty is, which is motherhood. And that's across the board. And so the policy areas that we're focused on are the ones that I mentioned. It's paid family leave. And we're not here to say exactly how it needs to get done, but we need a US policy around paid family leave. The second is the maternal health crisis as a whole. Women in this country are dying at a disproportionate rate to any other place. And don't get me started on what it means to be a woman of color doing that, giving birth in this country. That is even far worse and absolutely unacceptable. The next is, can we just get over these feeding wars and just support women no matter how they're feeding their children? I was a breastfeeding and then a bottle feeding, formula feeding mother, and I felt the stigma on both sides of that. And if anything in this country, I think that we're starting to stigmatize bottle feeding and formula feeding moms even more than breastfeeding moms. And can we just stop and all agree we all love our babies and are doing the absolute best that we can for them and find ways to support there? And I do think that this is a policy platform thing, because there are policies in place that are preventing media organizations from taking money from bottle companies. Well, I think most breastfeeding moms ultimately need a bottle at some point, right? And so there are things that I think this needs to be a policy platform. The other is affordable childcare. It's out of control, absolutely out of control. And there's something that if we can put a man on the moon, we can figure out how to deal with childcare in this country.
That's worth reading too.
And then, of course, something that's very near and dear to all of your health, maternal mental health. This is something that is underreported and under-talked about. suicide rates, motherhood is not something that's even included as like the rationale or the reasons for that. And I think it's time that we really start to talk about this. That we educate people on that it looks different across the board, so that partners know what to look for, and frankly, physicians know what to look for, because oftentimes they're not looking at the right things and are often, oh yes, you just had a baby, and pushing things aside. And so to really talk about what that means for our country with funding and really elevating the conversation there. And then lastly, the cultural expectations are part of this platform. As we said, I am a pretty empowered woman myself, and the founder of a company called Motherly, and I still fall into this. I have a very, very supportive spouse who, today flew home from Europe early so I could fly home here, and, we tag teamed. He was just texting me before, he's like, I can't believe we made this work. But I still find myself doing all the things and bearing the disproportionate weight of parenthood on myself. And I take responsibility for that too, because I just naturally do it over and over again. And I have to stop and say, this isn't working. And he has to, come forward and say, I can see this isn't working. Because one of the other stats is 62% of mothers said that they spend less than an hour a day to themselves not doing work or family things. And I think that fathers would say differently. Not to say that they're not working hard and that they're not supporting their families, but an hour a day, less than an hour a day. We probably need to drill it down. Less than a half hour? How much is there? But this, sharing the weight of parenthood, and really seeing it as a partnership, and having these kinds of conversations, like, let's get with Generation Z. Let's explain to them that they need to be talking about these things before they're getting married too, before they're really partnering up. And so having these conversations for ourselves, letting our children see that how we're navigating these, so that we're modeling this for them, because if you see it, you can be it. And we all ultimately fall into patterns of our own parents. And this generation's changing it up. So this is another very important one, I feel like, to add to the platform.
That's great. Any other remarks from the two of you? And then we would like to open it up to the audience for just a couple questions.
I think we've got 10 minutes left, so a question.
Yeah, let's get some questions. As we're waiting, because I'm hoping we have some questions, why don't we take a look in the app too, if we can. I read something recently about the importance of paid family leave for fathers, because, and that employers need to change culture to make it okay and almost demand that fathers take a paid time leave mandate. And it might have even been a story on Google, but the research showed that studied fathers who took time off, like it addressed everything that you're talking about here, and marriages lasted longer, and all these really important things. I also want to acknowledge that Stephen in the room here has had a big smile on his face.
I've noticed that smile. It's always good to have that encouraging person in the audience.
He's like, I can relate to everything you're saying. I think that's what you're saying. But Stephen said last night to me, like, what if we declared 2021 the year of the father?
Love it. Let's do it.
That's right. So anything that you want to say more about the role of fathers?
We can't do this alone. That's the whole point, right? It does take this. People ask sometimes, we're in a cultural revolution around gender in this country, and that's super important. And people have said, why did you name the company Motherly? Like, shouldn't it have been Parently or something like that? And I said, we are unapologetically woman-centered, because this is a uniquely, experience for a woman to go through, with all of the hormonal and all the other things that are accompanied with it at this point. And that the challenges that we're faced right now with, and the inequality, is often stemmed from this motherhood penalty, right? But that is not to say or to ignore the challenges that are also being faced for fathers, and that there is a different kind of pressure. And frankly, if we over-index on the other side of supporting women, we leave behind, and we actually, go the wrong direction for men. And I think that there is celebration of men that does need to happen, and of masculinity that needs to happen, and learning how to raise our children with that, and again, model that in our relationships. But we cannot leave men out of the equation. We absolutely cannot. We have a lot of do not do's at Motherly. We do not, even though I cursed just now. Motherly, we do not curse. We do, because the absence of a curse word offends no one, but the presence of it does offend some. So we do not curse, we do not complain about our children, and we do not complain about our spouses. So we will not make fun of, we don't talk about the man flu, except for one article that said it's true. Okay, it was an expert-driven article that actually men do experience the flu differently. But that's the point. We're not here to bash one side or the other. It really does take all, and I love the idea of declaring Year of the Father, 100%.
I just would want to add to that, though. I do think there is an opportunity where employers and organizations can take it a step further. We often think that we need to leave this at home, and that these conversations of how men show up or how they parent is meant for those conversations in the home. But policy does influence, and so having equal leave, mandating men to take their leave, training managers on why it's important and how to create a culture that supports all working parents, right? That then changes their capacity to be that parent in their home, which then gives that mother an opportunity to create more space and be more creative. So.
That's great. I think we have a question from Samantha.
Mine's more of a statement. I work with a lot of new moms, and I've really realized, being a mom of a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, that my husband is of a generation now, they don't have anyone to look up to like we do. Mm-hmm. They now are charting this new path of being an equal partner. And so I feel where we don't want to cut them slack, because we do a lot, but we have to understand that they go to their dads. My father-in-law doesn't remember anything. My mother-in-law did it all. And so this is such a new thing with, I guess, the end of Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z, of they don't have a role model. So they're doing this.
100% agree. We did on that whole woman-centered versus, we launched a digital magazine for a while with Medium called Apparently, and I wrote an article there that was really a letter to my husband. It was on our 9th anniversary, and talking about the fact that we do not get it right most of the time, right? Like it's a constant conversation, but really acknowledging that he did actually come from a family with 2 working parents. His mother was a dentist and his father was a psychiatrist, and they were 2 working parents with big careers that did have a partnership, but still not to the level that we're expecting of men today. And while you have to balance not congratulating, right, or over, coddling and oh, you did such a great job, right, and making it an expectation, but also appreciating that, no, this is a completely different model that none of us have seen. I don't know how to have these conversations. I didn't see my mom navigate this with my father. We're creating something new, and it's amazing and it's worth it, but there are friction points that exist and are going to exist because they always do. Anything worth doing is hard. This is worth doing, but I think that's incredibly important to point out.
Just one data point. It's so important, the whole discussion about parental leave and giving that support to new families who are raising the next generation and making that investment in our culture. But there's an interesting data point out of Canada where they've looked at the incidence of postpartum depression and measured it at almost 24%. So even higher than we would measure it here in the United States. And what that speaks to me about is that paid parental leave is not sufficient. It's important. It's an important next step. But we shouldn't allow people to think that solved the problem. We need to give families much more support than that, and that has to be part of the yes and discussion that we have.
Necessary but not sufficient.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Good. I think we have one more question, and then we're going to wrap up with some points on the Year of the Mother.
I want to thank you very much for your presentation, and I will self-identify as a baby boomer mom with millennial kids, and I've learned a lot about how they probably feel about expectations that we put on, lovingly saying, this worked for us, you should do it the way we did it, and it would be much better if we did less talking and more listening and let them go at their pace and help other mothers of my generation be patient with I've been complaining so much. All my friends have grandchildren, and I don't have any yet. But I need to say that's a good thing to my kids and say I totally understand. And that whole expectations and layering from my strongly career-oriented daughter, I'm just really going to give her the gift when I get home of saying, you take your time, honey.
That's such a gift.
It's a nice comment.
The number one thing, and also just acknowledging what her fear really is, because what we hear from women about what they're afraid of, it's not childbirth, it's not being pregnant, they're afraid to lose themselves. And that is the thing that, if you have the empathy around that she's scared about how much she'll lose of herself, right, through this. And I think that's worth being patient for, right? Thank you.
Let's end by reminding folks how they can get involved with the Year of the Mother.
Excellent. So while Motherly and Mom Congress were the declaring organizations, this is not a branded initiative. We were really just lighting the fire for Year of the Mother. And so you can go to yearofthemother.org. We host it on Motherly, but there's no Motherly branding. This is really meant to be a grassroots movement, again, that we lit this fire, that people can use the hashtag, use it from this week, hashtag Year of the Mother. You've got a reminder, I think, on the lanyards there. So Year of the Mother, there are events that are going to be hosted this year. We're working on some days of action related to that, related to, we're still trying to figure these things out, and we want you to figure them out. Go to your employers and say, what are you doing about this year being the Year of the Mother? Work with them to actually have initiatives related to it. Incorporate it into any of your work. If you're publishing a piece or being interviewed or talking on a panel, just spread this word. Have local conversations with your own community, with a book club. Find a book that you can read together and come together and talk about these issues. It has to happen at every level. Tell your partner, I realized, I learned today that this is the Year of the Mother, and what does that mean in our family? So just take this conversation up and down. We also have, this is an election year, so it is, not a coincidence. We picked it this year. This is the year when there are town halls, when there are, debates happening and questions from the audience, and there are letters being written to congressmen, from the local government on up. And this is the time to make sure these questions are being asked of our elected officials. And so write a letter, pick up the phone, ask a question.
We've got great tools on the yearofthemother.org website. Check it out, including toolkits, conversation starter, Q&As. We also have a place on the website for people to share what they're doing. So if you know of an employer, your employer takes action because of you, we can collect that. And I'm looking at Mary Beth because I think both Motherly and Mary Beth might feature an employer in Forbes and on Motherly. So there are really some important and opportunities here for all of you to get engaged, and employers. Any final remarks before we wrap up?
No, just thank you all for the really important work that you're doing. It's this hard, sticky problems take time, and they take a real united and they take time and effort and grit and persistence and passion, and I see that here amongst all of you. So thank you for the hard work that you're doing every single day.
What word comes to mind when you think of 2020 mom?
Is Blair in the room? You know what I think Blair would do? Do you remember what she did yesterday? I was going to say last week. It feels like last week. Do you remember what Blair would do? Come here, Melanie. No. Come on. She's saying yes. Hassana, come here. Come up with me. While we're waiting, for those of you who weren't here yesterday, you might be like, what are these people doing? But it was really fun, I thought. So yesterday, what Blair did before she presented was she shouted out our theme for the conference. And she said, I'm going to say we can, and what will you say? We're going to say we can first. Ready? We can do more. We can do more. We can do more. We can do more. Woo! All right, thank you. A little time there to to kill. So I am going to share, let's see if it's coming up. What one word resonated with you the most in the last 2 days? Support. Interesting. I love this. And last year, the word collage helped us plan this event. So your words are helpful for us to think about. We're seeing equity, support, empowered. Jill, I think that might have had something to do with you. Community, which can mean so many things. Movement. That's wonderful. Thank you for those words. We will take them to heart as we plan the rest of our year. And we have one more word collage that we want to do before we wrap up.
Okay, then I think actually there's one more thing that we're doing. So I've stayed up here to make sure that Apple has a moment to recognize a certain someone whose name I think was on there.
I would like to call the rest of the 2020 Mom Board to come to the stage, please.
I want to share that today, this is so special already, but today is the 15th anniversary of the day that my little brother took his life, and he suffered from depression. And so it's a special day for me to get to be with all of you already doing this important work. And I love that the word family was there, and I know it has multiple meanings, but you are our family. And so thank you for allowing me to do this great work in his honor and in so many lost mothers' honors. It's such a pleasure, and you do not, this is a gift for me. You do not need to give me anything else, but thank you so much.
So we would like to honor Joy Burkhard for her outstanding leadership and advocacy on behalf of mothers, babies, and families, presented by the Board of Directors of 2020 Mom.
Well, on that note, let's picture. Thank you so much for being a part of our family, for coming to our event. Thank you again to our sponsors, especially our presenting sponsor, the California Healthcare Foundation, our gold sponsors, the Zoma Foundation, Cigna, another place I call home, and of course, the team from Sage. We're so grateful for what you're doing and for what you're doing for mothers. Thank you to everyone for being a part of our family.